Welcome everyone to Array Global's monthly workshop. We're excited to have everyone here as people are still coming in from the waiting room on our Zoom, and also we have several people on Facebook. So a special welcome to all of our new guests. I know we've had a lot of repeats, so welcome to them also. We've been doing these workshops now for a year and a half or more and helping schools as they're moving through the pandemic. So we're really excited to be able to present some great technology training this time. So a lot of special welcome to not only our new participants, but also we have several people from the Ministry of Education in several different countries. So we'd like to especially welcome to our workshop today. Also, would like to talk about a few different things as we are getting ready to wrap up an exciting academic contest. This is a writing contest right around the world. Your students can submit an essay of 500 words or a piece of poetry, topic of your choice. The deadline is this month, so we're getting a lot of submissions. So we're excited to be able to provide this awesome academic contest in partnership with Epicenter Education out of Las Vegas, Nevada. So please make sure that you sign up for this and you have your students submit their entries. It'd be an exciting time for them to be able to participate in this wonderful activity to get them connecting with students around the world and then also just kind of stretch them a little bit in their writing. This month we have two different students we'd like to recognize as our Array Global Students of the Month. And we chose two students because they're twins. They're twins out of the United Arab Emirates. Rachel Diaz, we'd like to recognize her for her excellence in academics, her sports, and being an example and leader for her peers. Only in second grade, but a wonderful student. And then her twin brother, Troy Diaz. He is also a great worker in school, being kind and finding ways to help others. And Drew, you'd find this interesting about Troy. His person that he really likes to model and follow is Elon Musk. He really likes Elon Musk. So again, please make sure you look at our Facebook page and you see our students of the month. And then also, I don't know if I had this up when I was talking about it, but our Writing Around the World contest. I'll put the link in where you can read more about it. There are cash prizes, there's certificates available. And it's just, again, a great way for us to participate in these different activities. So a few different other things as we get into this. Just first like to remind everyone that if you have a question or a comment, please add that to the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat, and there'll be times that we might have to interrupt or interject Dr. Drew and be able to ask him some of your questions if we're seeing some of the same questions come out over the course of the workshop. And then also at the end of the workshop, as you remember, many of you who have attended in the past, we end right at 10 o'clock Saudi Arabia time. And at that time, we give everyone about 20 minutes to fill out the post-workshop survey, the survey that allows you to get your certificate in a few days. And during that time, we will pull up some of the questions that have been going through chat, and you'll be able to ask questions to the presenter or to me and Dr. Ray. Dr. Ray is having a little bit of a problem with his internet right now, and hopefully he's going to be able to jump back on with us pretty soon. But it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Drew Hines. I've worked with Drew, been on several visits with him in the past, and have some wonderful memories. And I know some of you do too, have some great memories of having him in your school and working with him. And so we're really excited to have him on with us. Last year, as many of you might recall, he did a wonderful presentation on technology, because at that point, we were doing so much of our education distance-based. And so this time things are a little bit different in many of our schools. Some schools are face-to-face, some schools are hybrid, and there might be a few that are still doing distance-based. But regardless, you'll still be able to learn some great tools from Dr. Drew and be able to implement these into your classroom or your face-to-face classroom or your virtual classroom, whatever it is. So we're excited to turn the time over to Drew. He has the controls and he's going to run it from here. And I think he has shared his slideshow with you already in the chat. So welcome, Dr. Drew.
Thanks, Dr. Jake. I'm gonna post those slides one more time. Make sure that folks have access to them. Because sometimes if you come in late, you miss the tag. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Well, I have some slides to work through, but I want this to be interactive, and we'll have 3 interactive questions right away. And I want you to feel welcome to jump right in and put your feedback into chat so that we can keep this interactive. My name is Dr. Drew Hines. I'm going to share a little bit about myself, just in terms of 20 years in Oregon, State Department, head of school, of online school, worked mostly at the intersection of technology and education throughout my career. But what's most important today is that I have a pretty unique view because I've served as a teacher, a CTE instructor, head of school, and a technology director. So as a technology director in a school district, you're looking for things that are going to save you time and be reliable. And at the end of the day, standard technology works because it's always going to be up and running, and you're going to be focused on your connectivity, your device, and your display. And those things are always going to work, and you're going to be happy. And you don't even call tech support because those things that you have in your classroom are standard. So one of the things I'm going to emphasize today is standard technology tools to increase student engagement. It's not that we're not innovating, it's that we're identifying things that are in a typical classroom that are going to work for us. So that picture in the bottom right is actually one of the classrooms in Huntington Beach. I spent 20 years in Oregon, and a year ago moved to Huntington Beach, California, where they've spent a significant amount of resource remodeling classrooms with a spaceboard interactive display, and in the most recent version of the solution, 3 interactive panels in each classroom. That allows the teacher a lot of flexibility to be able to have students displayed work on one screen, possibly even across 2 screens, and then them teach and work at a smaller screen off to the side. Every student has a touchscreen Chromebook, so they're managed. They're pretty simple to deploy. They're easy to give push out apps to, and it's just a lot of fun this last year. But the 5 years previous to that, I worked to get a school ready for the pandemic, and we didn't know that the pandemic was coming, of course, but we had put together hybrid courses. We were using a learning management system. We had one-to-one deployment in terms of every student, kindergarten through 2 having an iPad, and 3rd grade through 12th grade having a Chromebook, and teachers with their laptop. So we were ready. When the pandemic hit, we had a lot of things already in place and a lot of the content already put into online courses. So I want to welcome you to shoot me an email if you have questions as a follow-up to this session, but I want to start with these 3 questions, and I would ask in chat that you respond to these 3 questions. And this really has to do with the presentation I made in August. I think it was August 22nd, Jake, of 2020.
Really,
when I presented
right before we really got hit with school shutting down, huh? For the year.
Yeah, it was a perfect time because I had all this experience in running an online school, and I was able to offer some suggestions early on with the kinds of tool sets and approaches to being responsive to families, because it was a shift for everyone from a focus on kids when they're in the class to a family, because you're in their living room. And as you can see by the picture here, a little bit of humor in there, but could you put in chat, be vulnerable enough to put in chat for me? How are you keeping things simple and responsive for families? Because that was what we emphasized in 2020, was that you got to keep things simple, just a few tools, and then teach and reinforce in the use of those tools. So how now, whether you're online or you're hybrid, flex, whatever environment you're doing, how are you keeping things simple and responsive for families? Could you put that in chat? And I'll just give it a second to have folks contribute a little bit here.
And while they do that, we'd like to welcome Dr. Ray back. He's figured out his technology issues. So welcome back, Dr. Ray.
Ahmad says guidelines. That's great. Yeah, you teach behavior expectations, safe, respectful, responsible, in a discussion board, in Zoom. You teach those same things that you would teach in a face-to-face classroom, you reinforce those with the kids in online or in hybrid so that they know what to expect. High points and guidelines, great. A little bit of homework, yeah, and the homework is probably really directed towards finish this thing, and then in a week time frame, the Monday the homework is distributed, Tuesday they're working on it, Wednesday there's a tutoring session, Thursdays there's a reinforcement, and by the end of the week the students are reflecting on what those concepts were, either by phone or by Zoom or what other communication tools you're using. Now in face-to-face, yeah, make it practical for children to understand. That's great. Brief, regular communication. Yes, way to go, Lisa. That responsiveness wins in online learning, right? Because if you're super responsive, it doesn't have to be detailed. It just needs to be quick, because people have an expectation in online. I mean, you get on Amazon, you order something, you expect it to be here in days, possibly even hours. So the responsiveness is super important in this new environment that we have to work in. Feedback, that's great. Weekly plans, organization. Yeah, okay, so I think we're on the right track. And I think we've all been through this learning process this last year, right? In terms of 21st centurizing education. We've made huge gains really quickly. So this next question asks, and I'd love you to include you in chat still. I want to ask the question, do you have a learning management system? Do you have it yet in place? And I would imagine most folks do, but I want to reinforce that you need some sort of system to stitch it all together. Whether, Seesaw is more of a primary tool, and I cower to think it's even a learning management system, but it kind of is for primary. It's kind of more like a journal portfolio for kids. Blackboard, Moodle, Desire to Learn, Brightspace, Canvas, Fade, those are learning management systems that have the discussion board, the messages, the modules, the discussions, the all of those different things that stitch together a learning management system. And how's it working? So, and if you have a learning management system, I'm looking for you to insert in chat. Okay, so people are using Moodle, that's great. There's other learning management systems out there, but these are some of the most popular. Google Classroom, yep. And I think I said last year that Google Classroom is more like a document management system, but there's even a gradebook function built into Google Classroom now. So Google's trying to evolve it to involve, you have all at your fingertips. You have Google Meet, you have Google Classroom, you have Google Docs, you have Google Presentations. It's a nice ecosystem to work in. Classera, great. Yep, uploading videos. Oh, you're ahead on that one. That's great. Hiba, I think we're going to have a question next that I'd love for you to insert on Zoom and Google Meet. Yep. So you have synchronous video sessions, and possibly you're pushing out a video session. And I think a year ago, we talked about how you might lecture or have a session for 15 or 20 minutes, but then you condense that down to about 3 minutes, and then you record a summary and you post that summary. That was one of the things I heard from the feedback from our last session that everybody liked a lot, is the idea of don't post you might post the whole lesson, but then post a summary of just the 3 to 5 minute summary that reinforces the things you really wanted to get across. And sometimes after you've done it live, you have a few tips on how to get it across to kids easier. All right, this last engagement question here has to do with your use of video. There's terms we could use like synchronous and asynchronous, but live video is just synchronous. It's at the same time. Not live is anything that you post that's a not live video. And this question has to do with how we're using video in general, because it's a really powerful form of learning. Reason why kids spend so much time on social media and YouTube, it's a powerful form of pushing content out and getting kids engaged. How are you using video is this last engagement question. Both live, that means Zoom, and whether it be Skype or FaceTime, screen, I guess Screencastify wouldn't be not live, but Google Meet sessions. And then the not live sessions, more like you find this really terrific video that illustrates a concept and you push it out to the kids that week in your module. Everybody should watch this video and then answer these questions, or even better yet, watch this video and pause at 1 minute in and then answer a question in order to get to the rest of the video. There's some great tools out there that do that. LMS, Edbook, oh, big blue button within Canvas, great. All right, so that kind of, we've hit on these three questions, and it's really a review. I'd encourage you to go back to view that session from August 22nd of 2020, because it was a lot of reflecting, I think we did at that point to kind of launch into this new era that we were heading into in terms of full-time distance learning, online learning environments. So I want to offer a couple of things here and then jump into the content. The first is, as you're putting together video, consider these things that will improve your video. One, go landscape view on your phone. If you're going to use it, get a better picture that way. Don't use copyrighted music. Make sure you have good lighting, because good lighting is really super important in terms of recording, because the detail that comes across there for kids or whatever you're showing, lighting is super important. Make sure you're using quality audio, whether it be an external microphone or a pair of a headset for that teacher. It's a $20 investment in a headset. Everyone, if you're going to engage with online learning, make sure that those kids are getting good audio of what you're saying. And then practice. A lot of times, Screencastify videos I'll record, I'll go over them 2 or 3 or 4 times, and by the 3rd or 4th time, I've really got it condensed down to concepts in the way that I really intended to communicate it. So work on practicing your videos. So those are just some tips. And then I have 3 quotes here that just kind of have to do with what we're talking about today too. Is if you're getting a sales pitch, and I know as a technology director, I get calls all the time from vendors wanting to sell me something, and they're promising me the moon. And they're saying, hey, this is going to do this and it's going to do this. I'm telling you, just keep it simple. Learning management system and a handful of tools. Teachers, a lot of times, they're going to be out there trying out new things. Just work to try to keep it tight with just a couple of tools that you've taught with the kids and the families and reinforced. So if it's too good to be true, something's wrong. Keep it tight, keep it simple, choose just a few tools. And then as far as Mark Twain said, eat the frog. So essentially, if it's your job to eat the frog, it's best to do the first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. So if you're going to try to get together and prepare a lesson, don't put it off. Start that Monday morning routine or whatever that routine is for you, and get the hardest things out there first. And a lot of times preparation for online learning is the hardest part, because you got to spend the time up front, investment to be successful when the learning is happening. Second quote here.
Drew,
Yeah.
there's kind of interesting comments going on. What are the best ways to choose the best learning management system? I know it's dependent upon the school, but do you have any thoughts or ideas on what specific things schools should look for in selecting a learning management system?
Well, does it have embedded video? So right now, one of the most powerful tools in learning is to be able to build a module, click a record button, and have that video be embedded into the learning management system and be able to insert questions that are formative along the way. That's a really powerful tool. So I know that Desire to Learn Brightspace, Moodle has some tools around that. Blackboard absolutely has some tools in that area. Google Classroom, you can just switch over to Facebook, or YouTube Go Live, and Canvas has a recording tool called Studio, that Canvas Studio that's built in. So I don't know about Fede if it has that, but because I haven't used it as much. But look for that video embedding tool. Most learning management systems are down to these things around the right side here. They have documentation, they have tracking and assessments, they have links to other software, a whole API universe of things that you could use, like Turnitin for turning in assignments, or OneDrive or Google Drive for integrating in terms of turning in assignments. And then you want a good gradebook. You want the things that integrate with your gradebook and your student information systems. Sometimes the best tool is the tool that already has those connections with whatever you're using. So if you're using a learning management system that already works really well with another student information system, then stick with that. If it has the basic tools, stick with that, and then train the teachers to do it, and then launch your kids into the next grade. Does that help, Jake?
Yeah,
Let
yeah, I think you
me
nailed it.
interrupt you just really quickly. Dr. Drew, I'm on. And hello, everyone. I'm having tremendous internet problems today. So I thought I'd say hello while I know I'm on. But I also want to say there was a wonderful statement, Drew, that's kind of going along with what you said from Afsana. She says, we will walk slowly, but not backward. And it's going along with what you just said.
Well,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I think that goes along with what we're dealing with COVID too, and maybe that's what she's referring to. But it can absolutely be applied to technology. But COVID, we're walking slowly, but we're going forward.
Yeah.
We were in such a hurry a year ago, right? And everybody had to like get ready. And now what's wonderful is everybody's kind of you let the chaff and the in the hay, you separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And the chaff is blown away, and now you have the things that really stuck. Well, those things that stuck, we're going to reinforce. They're going to be part of our education system moving forward, and a learning management system is an essential piece. Abraham Lincoln's quote here is terms of 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. The idea here is that you spend time preparing for the lesson. And then those 15 minutes of learning is just really super powerful because of all the preparation and alignment and meticulation, our alignment, video recording, all the things you did to curate the content. And now you've got this 15 minutes that launches the kid. I'm not sure that a traditional teacher right now has that amount of time because they're teaching now face to face. But there's still pieces to this that we can capture from this last year and carry it forward, like common prep times where teachers can work together and get maybe a lesson that they developed this last year and then put it into a hybrid environment and use it together. And now that we have all of that collaborative content that they've developed over this last year. This last quote that I want to offer really talks to how the apple falls from the tree. And the typical education saying is, well, the parent is this and now their kid is this. And I want to encourage you to give every child a chance to rise above their circumstances. I love this about friends of mine that I can see a few of you on here that are educators, is that you have given kids a chance to rise above the expectations that you had for them, and they'll exceed your expectations. I just want to encourage you to don't let your anticipated expectations of a kid limit their ability to perform. Expect that they are going to exceed your expectations, and I'll bet you they are. So in this context, those are my 3 little quotes, and then I'm going to get into the content here. Okay, so where the rubber meets the road as an IT director or a technology director, and I'm sure you have people in your environment that support your technology. I've spent the last 6 years doing that. If they don't have to call upon me, I've done my job. So for the most part, if we put things into classrooms and they just reliably work all the time, that would be a perfect environment. That's not perfect. Most of the time, the things we put in, we're still trying out, we're still updating. Sometimes there's going to be days where it doesn't work. But one of the standard things that is connectivity, device, and display. If I, as an IT director, can get things in the classroom that are going to work reliably, good internet connectivity, that means we need to invest in our infrastructure. We need to have good servers and network stability. I need to have a backup plan so that if our connection to the internet through one provider, this one is a backup. So I have to work to get those things in place. And totally understand that as a teacher, that might not be your role, or as an administrator, that might not be your role. But these are the 3 things that are essential, that are standard in our environment: connectivity, device, and display. And the device might be a Chromebook or an iPad or a laptop, but it needs to be reliable. It needs to be dependable for the students. And then these interactive displays now is a standard in the classroom. It used to be that you'd have a projector on a white screen. Now you have interactive flat panel displays that 20 touches at the same time can be happening. You see these kids huddling around and doing some interaction there. It takes a teacher time to invest in planning for the use of these tools. And then the last piece that kind of goes a little bit into the future is I wanted to at least share with you the future of virtual reality. These devices, this is an Oculus too, but there's 10 or 20 other devices that are virtual reality devices. These are under $500 now. And if you think of where we were at with Chromebooks and iPads 5 or 10 years ago, I think by 2030, we should probably be seeing more virtual reality devices in our environments, especially if we rely on some of the consumer-based markets to kind of push things along. There's one of the apps that is an Anne Frank experience where in your VR environment, you can crawl into the space with Anne Frank and ask her questions and have this scenario happening outside with the Nazis. And then there's a workplace environment app where you can choose to work in these different environments and scenario-based learning. This is the next step in education, but it's still on the edge. So I wouldn't put it in this category of standard technology yet, but it's definitely good to start to think about your environment as these interactive flat panel displays. Every classroom's got to have a document camera and interactive flat panel display connected to a teacher laptop. And then moving towards the future, we look more with VR and things like that.
Can I just add here, Dr. Drew, one of the things that makes teachers human is to realize we don't know everything. And sometimes our kids, our students are far more advanced in technology than we are. And if we're putting in these things and maybe asking the students to assist, that really makes the teacher human. We're not expected to know it all the time. And especially in the area of technology, how we keep up with everything is amazing, but it's a learning curve, and our students can help us with that.
Yeah, and Zenabib, I think, asked a question about quizzes or Kahoot. And a year ago, we talked a little bit about that as an interactive tool. Websites that do that, especially it's a go-to, right? Like a Kahoot quiz with that blink, blink, blink going in the background, really engaging activity that the kids look forward to. But it's something that's more standard that you use, and you might even use it in a daily oral language or in language arts, but in math and reinforcement and science, it's something that you'd use as a standard tool. So way to go, that's a great example. So as you keep students engaged, it's gonna be, you're gonna use standard tools to go back to, your bread and butter. Kahoot and quizzes might be one of those. But think about it in terms of the I do, so you model it and show, we do it together, and then you do it together in terms of you letting the students, or it's a release, and then them doing it with independent practice. Sometimes this is called guided practice or independent practice. This I do, we do, you do structure is really common now in professional development trainings. So I want you to think about that in the context of the technology. Sometimes a teacher would model something and then pass it to, we do together. Okay, so I'm going to write, or you come up and do this piece, and then we're going to have this student on their Chromebook or on their iPad go do that thing. So the gradual release of independent learning is something we want to be driving at, because that's going to be a higher cognitive demand and structure in your classroom that are going to lead kids to being really engaged. So here's some of those learning management systems we talked about earlier. They are going to have common aspects, as we talked a little bit about earlier. Someone asked about, what do you use to select the learning management system? And I suggested, if you have already one that works with the student information system that you use for attendance, use that one. That's probably going to be the one that you want to be linked to. But if you're in the market to consider different ones, for God's sakes, don't do it during the middle of the year. Wait until the summer months, have a pilot or a summer school that gets geared up, train the teachers, spend plenty of time and energy to getting the teachers trained up before the start of the school year. But they're going to have these common things around the outside here, exams and practice assessments. They're going to have content that either plugs in or that the teachers have already developed. They're going to have collaborative pieces that between different courses where teachers can share. There's going to be progress tracking or assessments that are formative. There's going to be assignments, modules that feed into a grade book of some sort. That's the learning management system. And this is the really second tip. The first being keep things simple and responsive in the classroom as well as online. And then the second tip of use the learning management system to the full degree that it can be used. Learning management systems aren't just for online learning. They're intended for both hybrid, virtual, flexible learning, because the students are just going to have access to that content in a very organized way as a supplement to what you're doing in the classroom. So there's a saying in ed tech that 90% of the technology is used to 10% of its capacity. I mean, think of the number of tools you use in Google Docs or Microsoft Word. It's only a very small part that you use most of the time. Most of the track changes or review changes or formatting, all the things that you don't never use in the tool. Learning management systems are the same way. You can use a learning management system for messaging, for discussion boards, for video, for announcements. I mean, just go to the next level of using that learning management system so that it becomes part of the way you do school, both online, whether it be in the pandemic period or when a shutdown happens, or when it's face-to-face where your students are working through stations and getting access to content. And then the last piece is a little bit of an ad here is the curation of content. As an educator, as a teacher, my job is to interpret and determine what is important for the child. This is why computers can't replace teachers. It doesn't matter if it's Khan Academy or any sort of software like Alex or Wonders. No software identifies the gaps, sits next to the child at their elbow, and explains to them why this is true and that's true. It still takes adults to interpret and determine the pacing for a child so that they're not frustrated. Because a kid, you've done it. You've probably shared something with a kid and then they're just glazed over their eyes and you've lost them. And that's not the time to keep pushing, right? That's the time to stick back and ask, what do you understand? Tell me a little bit about what you understand so far about this, and then see what where the gaps are, and then insert that. That's where adults do. We need teachers to continue to sit in that gap between the content and the knowledge and skills that the child has. And that's where curation comes in. Teachers need to be curators of content. Teachers spend a lot of time on Teachers Pay Teachers and curriculum and just Google finding good websites. As we put those things into a learning management system, we're going to be able to use them from year to year. And that teacher is going to have a bunch of tools that are curated and determined in terms of pacing. And again, those week-to-week structures are a pretty good way to go. But how does the pacing work in terms of the content? Can you slow down the pacing for some kids and speed it up for other kids? That differentiation really is important too, as you think about these tools.
Drew,
Yeah,
I had a quick question. Do you think we have to be pretty careful with what kind of tools that we're using? Because being in classrooms, I've seen some teachers just use some of these tools, not the tools that you mentioned, but some other tools just as kind of a babysitting service. And so I know in my school district, we actually have a process that teachers have to go through if they want to use some of this content that's online to ensure that students are maximizing the time that they're in the classroom and that it's really engaging the learning.
Yeah, I would say you come back to a core content that the district or the school has adopted, right? They're going to consider all of these tools against it, and then they're going to choose to go deeper in a particular set of tools. And a lot of times those tools have online components that are very infrequently used. So again, this goes back to keeping it simple. Identify the content and the tools that you're going to reinforce and you're going to use over and over again, and then use those to go back to. There's going to be tools that are supplemental that add on a thing or two, but you're right, Jake. There's going to be YouTube videos that are very controversial, especially in certain areas right now, in terms of you have to be very careful as a teacher, and especially since those videos and things are super transparent now with families right there looking at the content. It's super important that we consider the curation process in the context of our district or in our school. Yeah. Digital license.
That really goes along with really good curriculum management also, is not everything that you find on the internet is appropriate. Not every piece of literature that you read is appropriate. And the teacher has to be the one to kind of manage this because you can get into some real evil things on the internet, thinking that you're getting into something that is okay, and then find out, number one, it's misleading, or number two, it might be inappropriate. But that's where the teacher can really help students see the appropriate use of these materials.
And then I would say, just in terms of the filtering, I 100% agree, Ray. But as an IT director, my job is to keep the students safe in terms of filtering too. And you brought that up at the beginning of what you said. Having a policy where our filtering is on those devices that are going home with the kids. If you don't have a filter in place, at least in the US, we're required by federal law, if those devices are accessing content and curriculum through the school internet, that they have to be filtered. And I can talk more about that, but essentially we either use a Fortinet or some sort of other filter in our location, but we also put out forth a tool like Securely that installs itself on the device where the student is accessing their Google account, so that all of their content in Chrome on that Chromebook is also filtered. So if they search for something and they're at home, it also would block things that are inappropriate that kids shouldn't maybe have access to. That filtering is not something I don't think 100% of schools thought about in this last year. And I worry sometimes about what students might have gotten into this last year.
I worry about that too. And, I think most schools do a pretty good job of selecting the major text vehicle that you're going to use in class and think, hey, that's the end of filtering. No, that's maybe just the beginning. And so we really have to be careful, especially in the world we live in today. We really have to be careful about what information we present or allow to be presented to our students.
And a landing page is one way to think about that, like a Clever or a ClassLink tool, where they have a portal where they go to, and here's all the curriculum that's adopted that they spend the most time in. That's a great way to start. And if your school doesn't have a Clever or a ClassLink portal where the kids single sign on, they log on to this one page and all their curriculum is listed there, consider putting something like that together, even if it's just a list of the curriculums that you use that the students would launch from to log into. But that single sign-on thing makes it really nice for a kid, because especially primary kids, it takes 5 or 6 minutes just for them to type in, their login and password. And that means the family or the teacher now is really working hard with the valuable instruction time just to get kids logged in. And tools like Clever and ClassLink have a QR code where they just show up the QR code and scan it, and it logs them in. So I'm going to keep going, but I want to welcome the questions. It looks like we can probably come back to some. Yeah, great. Thanks for posting that, Clever. So the review is to keep things simple and responsive for families. Use a learning management system to its fullest extent. Think about the tools in that LMS, like the video recording function, the discussion boards, the announcements, the calendar. Use those things to their fullest extent, and I think you're really going to get a benefit from it. The learning management system oftentimes has a place where you can list those curriculums that you use most often, either at the top for Desire to Learn or on the left banner for Canvas and Blackboard. But most learning management systems have a place where that one place where they go to get to that curriculum. And then the third is continue to think about curating content to identify what's most important and why. So I have two lists. I'll put these in chat, but the first one is, this was a year ago tool, but it's still very valid. The website link and then a description of that tool. You could spend an hour just shooting out tools, but the nice thing about this first list of technology resources is it lays out the name of the tool with a link, a description of what it does, and things to consider. And it's a way of thinking about, but again, go back to that idea of keep it simple. Choose 2 or 3 that you're using on a regular basis. If it's Kahoot, the kids love to keep coming back to that as a reinforcement of whatever you're teaching. So use that over and over again so that you get the full extent of the tool. If it's quizzes or Seesaw for the learning portfolio, use that. The student does something work, you picture it, and you reinforce it with the family so that they're coming back and looking at that. That's Seesaw, that's a great tool for that. With Canvas or Desire to Learn, you have parent roles that you can sign parents up to be observers in the class, so they see only the announcements and their children's posts, but not everybody else's. Those are things you can do in a learning management system that allows the parents to be engaged. And some of those tools are described a little bit more here in the links that I'll put in the chat in just a second. And then the Google Tools Matrix is just a description of, the Google Draw tool, the Google Presentation tool, and just using Drive for docs and sheets. You have a whole ecosystem that's just built out there for you for kids to be interactive and live and jumping into, editing and constructing and working at a higher order thinking activities. It's not that Google's the only tool out there. Microsoft 360 does a lot of the same thing. Teams, if you use that in your environment, Teams is a great tool for interacting. Skype with Word and PowerPoint and Excel, same kind of ecosystem and tools set as you would see in Google, but just a little bit different. All right, I think I'll post that, and then I want to just look to the chat for some questions that we might have missed, Jake, that we could kind of go back and rehash.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones, and this is something that we've talked with schools about in the past, is in some of the countries that we work in and that people are representing today, the internet's not that reliable. Do you have any solutions for that, or any thoughts or ideas? I know there's a program out there that you actually don't need the internet. It comes in with a huge database, and it looks like a router. You set it up in your school. It operates and runs like the internet. I just had slipped my mind the name of that product, but any ideas on what these schools can do in those countries that the internet is lacking?
Yeah, I mean, the good example today, Dr. Lindley had trouble. He was down and back up, but we had released the presentation slides ahead of time. So we did the preparation ahead of time to kind of prepare. I was a Boy Scout when I grew up, always be prepared. I never went camping without like an extra set of batteries for my flashlight, and a different, an extra little compass stowed away, and a snack and a poncho to make sure that I could survive the night. It's the idea of being prepared. And I love that about the Abraham Lincoln quote that, if you had 15 minutes of instruction, I'd spend 10 minutes of the time preparing for the 5 minutes of instruction. That might be a way of translating that. So prepare for the environment with the idea that the technology is going to be up and down. And I think a year ago, we talked about this in terms of online learning doesn't have to be just the web browser. Sometimes the phone is the most reliable way to communicate with families. And you can convey a concept if it's rainforests, and you were talking about the different layers of the rainforest or a certain kind of monkey. You could reinforce something with just a few-minute phone call with a kid that allows them to connect to the content. And then those activities that they're supposed to be doing in the middle are the things that they're doing while you're not connected with them, right? You don't have to be synchronously connected to be learning like that. And a lot of programs that you see there, it's not Zoom for 6 hours a day. Everybody realized this last year. It was Zoom fatigue. Some schools tried to have 3 or 4 hours of Zoom meetings during the day, and it was just exhausting for the teacher. It was really hard on the kids. And they realized that they needed to space out those environments and the activities with downtime, activities that were done that were not connected. So that's a way of thinking about that, a phone call to reinforce. The other thing I've seen really effectively used this last year is a personal video recorded for that child. So I watched this one teacher at the beginning of this last year that would record this 2 or 3 minute summary. Hey, Johnny, you're doing a great job on this. I want to see you continue to do this. I'll see you on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to this. Just a quick video. And you can do that in most learning management systems will allow you to do that in the LMS, and then send that video message in a message for them. So when they can log in, they get this very personalized video that was intended for them because it was and I mean, the teachers, like we talked about this last time, it's Dora the Explorer, right? It's like boots, and they're, as a teacher, you're an edutainer. I don't know if you remember that from this last year, but we talked about this as being an educator and an entertainer, an edutainer, and some teachers are super good at that edutainment. They're super engaging. And then you have other teachers that are data royalty, that they can swivel a spreadsheet, put it on a pivot table, bring it around, look at predictive analytics for the student, and start to determine where their growth path might be and identify which skill set needs to be reinforced when. So you have teachers that are both of these, the edutainers and the data royalty. And some teachers are both of those, very rare, but some teachers are going to have different skill sets. So encouraging teachers to work together so that maybe one does a really great job of personalizing the video and the other one is going to do a really good job of identifying what's coming up next and how the students are doing in the assessments and writing the questions in such a way that they're going to be valid and reliable for relying upon as a test question that's going to tell you what they truly know. So I guess there's a couple of ideas, Jake. I don't know if there's a perfect solution to that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. Another question that someone had a little bit earlier is about digital licensure, and how to best deal with that and making sure that we're following the licensing requirements that are out there. Any thoughts or ideas on how to access, how to get digital licensure and how to follow it?
Yeah, you need some sort of committee and a group of people working on this because it starts with the student information system. If you go from left to right, student information system to purchasing those licenses and then inserting them, having them linked to student accounts, because a lot of systems now rely on the student information, either class roster information or student performance information, to inform the curriculum and how it responds to the child. So that group is going to have to consider how many licenses they need, in what grade, and what adopted curriculum are they going to use in each grade and in each class. And I tell you, I can't tell you how many times as an IT director, I have a principal come to me and says, we want to buy this. And it's like October. I'm like, well, where was this in August when we were setting up, Renaissance Learning and High Street and McGraw-Hill and all these other curriculums? Where was it then? It's not adopted curriculum. It's not that I'm going to not do it for them, but I'm going to be like, well, where is this? And they're like, oh, it's an after-school program for the YMCA. Okay, I kind of understand that, but again, why didn't we see that curriculum at the beginning when we were purchasing it with everything else? So why do I have to circle back in October and try to make it work when we were setting that up originally? So you're going to have something like your student information system, and you might have ClassLink or Clever sitting in between that allows for that roster stuff to happen. And then your licensing happens after that. So you're going to have that person or group contact a vendor and purchase a license that's going to be activated in your system. And a lot of times they'll have onboarding calls, and you need to get your IT director involved. You're going to have procurement involved, because sometimes some of these curriculums require a credit card rather than a purchase order. So, I mean, it's just all over the map. Every digital curriculum I've ever adopted and worked with is a little bit different in the way that they implement one roster standard or the way they work with their API to make it all work together. And it never is super quick. It takes weeks or months to get it all working right so that it flows. Because think about it, if a class is named second grade Mrs. Johnson, and the company says Mrs. Johnson, second grade, and there's like 3 Mrs. Johnsons, well, now which one of the classes is Mrs. Johnson's? That's one example, but I could give you 100 other examples of where you try to integrate and get it set up right, and it doesn't work, and you have to fix it. And so it's best to start that process as early as like the end of the school year for the next school year, so that all that roster and stuff starts to work. And then in September, you can rely on it.
That's great. I think another question that came out is about other websites. We all know about quizzes and Kahoot. What are the main ones that really increase student engagement that are popular? And maybe that's just not a question for you, Dr. Drew, but for anyone who's on here who wants to post something in the chat. What are the most popular technology tools that people are using to engage students? Yeah, Nearpod.
Nearpod.
Yeah.
And again, I'd want people to go back to their learning management systems, because a lot of those tools are getting bought up or incorporated into LMSs. Yeah, Whiteboard or Jamboard is one that Google offers. Edpuzzle's great, has the videos built in, reinforcements. But again, if it doesn't incorporate into your learning management system, doesn't work with your student information system, you're going to give your IT department headaches. Or you're going to be entering all the student information yourself. I mean, that's another option.
Yeah, and I always caution people too not to get too many tools because then because every time you get a new tool, you have to train your students on it. You have to train your staff on it. So when you're training the students, that takes up precious instructional time. So use a lot of the same tools that they're familiar with. Hey, grab Kahoot, students, on your Chromebooks or your phones or whatever else, and access it and start utilizing it.
Yeah, IXL's mentioned that it's a great tool.
Yeah.
So yeah, every curriculum that you adopt is probably going to have some sort of digital version, and sometimes it's a PDF version. It's just super flat, or it's Think Central is one that I'm thinking of, HMH, that has a whole set of curriculum. It's like multiple varied levels of assessment tools, curriculum tools, activities.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, Dr. Drew. I think those are all the questions that have come up. We appreciate that. Dr. Ray, do you want to take it from here?
Sure do. I'm just typing a message to Colin right now. This has been, and Dr. Jake will tell you, this is one of the things that's really been a steep learning curve for me, this whole area. But I really appreciate people like Drew Hines and Jake Frankham. And of course, Drew is the master of all of this. This is how he spends his workday. I think that what I've heard here today really is important to understand that we all are at a different place on our learning with this. And it's the more we work with it, the more we use it. So that's something that we have to always keep in mind. We're not all going to be at the same place. As Drew mentioned, I was on with Drew and Jake. We always try to get on 20, 30 minutes before the workshop, make sure everything's working. My internet was just fine. And all of a sudden, 2 minutes before the workshop started, no internet. And so anyway, well, thank you, Drew Hines. As usual, tremendous presentation. I want to just make a quick announcement. The next workshop we will do, and Jake, did you get a chance to tell them about the next workshop yet?
I didn't. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead, and then I'll explain a little bit more about it and the date and the next workshop.
Yeah, so our next workshop is November 20th. It's going to be at 9 p.m. Saudi Arabia time again. And we're really excited to be partnering with an organization called The Leader in Me. It's a very popular and well-known organization that provides leadership tools to students throughout the world. They work with schools in the United States, many schools internationally. They're going to be presenting and talking about how we can best support our students in helping them in their character development and developing their leadership skills. And if you haven't seen the program, look it up. I know Dr. Ray and I and Dr. Drew, when we're at a school and some of the top schools that we're going into, we go in and the first thing that we're interacting with are students that have been trained in the Leader of Me program. So November 20th, 9 p.m. Saudi time. We're excited to see you all there. In the meantime, I really encourage you to go to their website, maybe watch some of their YouTube clips. It's an excellent program that can be implemented right into your school.
Great. And just as an aside, Dr. Jake and I will both be in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia with Khalid Mohammed, who's our regional coordinator there. And so we will actually be on the webinar or the program from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And then the other thing I suggest to you is, for those of you who are in Jeddah or near Jeddah, Dr. Jake and I will be doing a full day workshop, a live workshop in Jeddah. Watch your announcements to come, because you're going to be giving information, and we encourage all of you who are in that area to actually meet us in person. We'll be visiting schools in the Jeddah area, which, as you know, Jeddah is more than the city of Jeddah. It's much bigger than that, and we'll be doing some actual accreditation visits there. But we will actually be in Saudi Arabia when we have our next workshop. So thank you all who have been here today. It's been a tremendous workshop, and I've learned a lot from listening to Drew, who I've known now for more years than we want to count. And that's great. I remind us of two things. And by the way, I see Tony Crawford here. Drew is the first one who introduced me to Tony Crawford. So that's how Tony got involved. Two things I want to remind us of. And one of the first one goes specifically with what Drew spoke about today. And it's this: every student can learn, just maybe not at the same day or in the same way. And we're trying to show there are many ways we can help students learn. And finally, I want to close with this beautiful statement. Any of your students can be unresponsive at some time. Maybe you can't teach them today, but if you love them today, maybe you can teach them tomorrow. So let's remember that every student needs to be loved, and then we can teach them when they're ready. So thank you, everybody. It's been a great time today. We've had several people on our channel today, and I know many more are watching on YouTube, on Facebook. So thank you all. Dr. Jake, any other